In previous videos, in looking at the reach out feature, we've focused on sending messages to employees. But today we're going to look at how you can configure the reach out so that employees can respond to those messages and have it flow right through Temps Plus, and beyond that, directly to the cell phones of your staffing coordinators or to the email mailboxes of the staffing coordinators. And to do that, you would configure a global mailbox for all reach out messages to flow into and out of. And we'll take you through the setup on that right now. Global mailboxes are set up in the company setup area of the Temps Plus, and they are global to the given company. So if you had different companies set up, different Temps Plus companies, you could use different global mailboxes for each company. In the features section, you'll see towards the bottom of the General Features tab, global outgoing mailboxes for invoices, deposit advices, e-time cards, and SMS. And we're focusing on all of the reach out messages go through the SMS, the short message service, texting. And here is where you would specify use common email for sending reach out, text, and email. Most of the settings here are just standard mailbox setups. So if you're unsure of how to respond to any of the questions here, just have the person, whoever sets up your mailboxes for new employees, just create a new mailbox for the SMS reach out messages. A couple of the options that are worth discussing in detail: the HTML text file is like a signature file that can go out with any messages coming from your system, and that can have the user's name, for example, or their Temps Plus user ID. If we double click on this, and you'll be prompted as to whether or not you want to view the file, and just say yes, and we can come in and edit. The text that appears in braces, for example, the MSG at the beginning of the file, we refer to that as a token, and we support 3 tokens in the signature file. MSG, which is the contents of the message itself, whatever you're actually typed in to be sent out to the employee. User ID is the up to 8-character user ID that the user sending the message signed into Temps Plus as. And the third token, which isn't displayed here, is user. And user is the user's full name. It might be a bit formal if you've put in full names in their user ID setup in Temps Plus. But it's there if you want to use it. And again, anything that's not in braces will be printed literally. So in this case, if you had a message of hello world, it would be, and it was from Brian, the Temps Plus user ID Brian, then you'd have a message that was sent to the user of hello world from Brian at Bridgeware. One other thing on signature files: although you can use HTML, if you're sending text messages, you don't want to send HTML. Just use a straight text file. If you don't plan on sending text, then you can use an HTML file as well, and that can include images, logos, whatever. But if you're using reach out to send both text and emails, then keep it a straight text file. A couple more settings on this page. Subject is the default subject for any message going out. Save a copy in activities. You really want to do that. It provides a complete history of correspondence with any given employee in the system. If you aren't using a global mailbox, it's only providing history of messages you've sent. But if you are using the global mailbox, it's a two-way, complete conversational history with any employee in your system, a very important feature. And we'll look at that in a future video where we look at the impact of setting up the global mailbox. Spell check outgoing messages. It requires Microsoft Word, but it's a nice little feature, unless you're using a lot of slang in text messages. In that case, you probably don't want to use that. This last tab, Other, only applies if you're using the global mailbox for reach out text. And it allows you to specify how to handle attachments that you receive back from the employees. You can do one of 4 different things. You can drop them. You can attach them to the applicant's record or employee's record. You can pass them through to the staffing coordinator. Or you can do both. You can attach them to the record and pass them through to the staffing coordinator. It also lets you specify the Temps Plus attachment type for any files that you receive through the email and attach to the employee's record. So you could have a type, for example, in this case, unreviewed SMS file attachments. You can change those attachments as you review them. Change the document type. Again, that's Temps Plus document type, not the file type itself. Accept time cards for processing. This assumes that you're sending at least some employees time card spreadsheets that they can fill in and submit. And that would stage them for whoever does the processing. And finally, you can set up mail managers by location. If it's a multi-location Temps Plus, you can set up a postmaster for each location and an overall postmaster for the entire mailbox. And what happens is when the mail proxy is trying to determine how to route a given mail that's received from an employee, if it's unsure of how to route it, it can look at the location for that employee and route it to the mail manager for that location if there's no explicit direction on how to route it. And likewise, if there's no mail manager for a given location but there is a postmaster, it can send and will send any unroutable mail to the postmaster for the mailbox. So once you've set up mail managers for the various locations and an overall postmaster, you can create default connections for the employees, or as a matter of fact, for applicants and or employees, depending on when you want a default connection set up, which will establish a link from their email address to the mail manager for that location, so that you can have just tell all applicants or employees, based on the timing that you want the connection created, to send any email to this specific email address that you set up, your global mail handler, and it will route it to the appropriate person within your organization. The mail proxy program that monitors that mailbox will forward the applicant's or the employee's email to the appropriate mail manager for that location. And at the same time, the big benefit of all of this is that it all flows through Temps Plus. And the staffing coordinators or mail managers can communicate back with the employee, and that side of that again goes through the mail proxy and back out to the employee, so that the entire conversation is captured. And it doesn't matter if they respond from their cell phone the staffing coordinator I'm talking about at this point. It doesn't matter if the staffing coordinator responds to an employee from their cell phone. They can have the whole thing routed through Temps Plus and never give out their personal cell phone information, but just using the mail proxy. It's pretty slick stuff. So that completes everything that's needed for sending out email and text messages through a common global mailbox. But there's one last area that needs to be set up for retrieving that email, retrieving any email coming into that global mailbox and distributing it appropriately. That's handled through a program called Mail Proxy. It used to be called Resume Downloader. If you're currently using our online applications or online reports for customers and employees, then you're already using Resume Downloader, and the latest version of it will support retrieving and routing SMS and email messages. But the new program moving forward is something called Mail Proxy, and it's in your program folder, and you start it up, and it should be running on one machine on your network. It only needs to run in one place. And again, if you were using Resume Downloader, this all looks very familiar, and indeed there's no change in the interface. You would set up an account, and it would be primarily the same information that you set up in for your using the common mailbox in Temps Plus. This is the POP mail server as opposed to the SMTP server, and typically they're both the same. They may not be, but typically they are. So you can typically use the same information you used in the SMTP server questions in Temps Plus setup. If you're unsure about this, again, check with your guy that handles your mailboxes. Or give our support department a call. We'll be happy to assist you. The only other thing that I'd mention is if you're using it for email, you're going to want it running all of the time. You can set in preferences, you can install it as a Windows service, or at the very least start automatically when you log in. And again, it only needs to be running on one workstation in your network. Okay, now that we've got everything set up, let's just take the last couple of minutes to take a look at the impact that makes on the Temps Plus system. We'll call up an applicant and go to the Reach Out window. And one of the things, aside from the conversation history, which we'll get to in a moment, the biggest change here is that now you have responses, how you want responses handled when you send out a given email. By default, it is in kind. In kind means if I send an employee a text, and I've got a cell phone that accepts text, then have them respond to me via text. If I send them an email, then have them respond to my email address. But you can also send them a text and only have them respond to the email, to your email address. They don't get to see your email address. They're going to just respond to the mailbox. But this is actually an instruction to the mail proxy to say how you want the response from this employee routed. But looking at the history window, you can see that messages originated from within Temps Plus by the staffing coordinator from their cell phone to an employee, or from their email to an employee, but sent through the mail proxy, will be recorded on the left-hand side in white with the date they were sent on the top. Responses from the employee will be right justified, displayed in cyan, and with the date of their response, date and time of their response at the bottom of the response. So in this message here, can you make it on Friday? The response was yes, and they also attached some files with that. That response also was sent to Brian@bridgeware.net, the email address of this person, the staffing coordinator that sent the message to the employee. So it was not only flowing through Temps Plus, but also out to Brian at bridgewire.net via email.